We did an ED system for South Auckland Health, and developers used to go out there a lot. People in ED, they were just totally blunt, no sugarcoating. They just tell us why our product was rubbish, how it was terrible, then we fixed here and here and there. And after 6 months of getting periodically told what was wrong with the product, it actually became quite a good product. In fact, it actually became award-winning. In fact, it became a great product. But it was just interaction with the specialists, nurses in particular. That's how we got our very, very best products.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Today we're sitting down for a chat with Ian McCrae, who is the founder, former Chief Executive Officer of Orion Health, an award-winning provider of healthcare software that he founded in 1993. Ian has led Orion Health on an impressive journey today with offices in 15 countries and clients across 30 countries, and whose innovative software helps enable personalised healthcare for between 1% and 2% of the world's population. Welcome, Ian. How are you?
I think the word you're really reaching for is roller coaster. Impressive journey. I think a roller coaster might have been more. I don't know whether one of those we're going up again, but whether it's post-COVID pandemic, there's a newfound interest in health, all things health, health software. So we're on what's one of those going up parts of the roller coaster. Anyhow. It's busy times.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people in New Zealand would have a level of familiarity with Orion Health and your story, but probably not a huge amount of detail other than bits and pieces that have come through the media.
Before we start, big thank you to our show partners, to Vodafone, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, and Gorilla Technology for their support of the New Zealand Tech Podcast, and of course, their broader support of our tech and innovation ecosystems here in New Zealand.
Maybe we can start at the beginning in terms of, where did you get started in life?
I grew up in a place called Wairanga or Okaria, which is near Tikawata, which is near Huntley, which is in North Waikato. On a farm, it was idyllic. There's always things to do, machinery around the place. It's a great lifestyle. It's wonderful. And made you very self-sufficient. You kind of need to be when you're in the software business. Yeah.
So some good lessons to take forward.
And I'd say that some people do long-term plans as to what their businesses might look like. We never did that. You'd have to say that Orion was a little bit of an accidental success. We sort of woke up one day and Orion was a big company, and we just sort of every moment in time we look how to do things better, a better product, a better this, win a deal here, win a deal there, and over time you grow and grow and grow, and then one day or other you wake up 100, 200 people.
So what was the initial idea that you got started with? What was the initial opportunity that you saw, the gap in the market, the need? How did it actually come about?
Didn't want to be a consultant. Just talking about doing things and not actually doing it. We wanted to produce some real software, some real products, some real tangible things, and not just talking. Because prior to this, some of us came out of Ernst & Young, lovely, great company by the way. But as a consultant, you were always just giving advice, and you were never actually doing it. So we decided to form a software company.
Yeah.
It eventually became Orion Health.
Okay. So what was the initial start out? What was your sort of, your target, and what was the idea that you were able to, gain your first customers with?
Well, Paul, we would do anything for anybody.
Okay.
So we did some accounting software. We did, what else did we do? Travel reservation. That was pretty interesting. We did international airports. So we did the Brisbane International Airport, putting bags on the planes.
Wow.
Auckland International Airport. But the area where we got the most traction, the area that was the most satisfying, was indeed health. And so roughly about 25 years ago, we sold off everything else, got rid of everything else, shut it down, sold it off, and focused us on healthcare. And grew. So, that was the benefit.
New Zealand based, but in order to grow the business, you had to be selling around the world. How did you do that in the 90s?
Well, you got on a plane, you flew cattle class, and you stayed in hotels, usually 2 or 3 or 4 of us in the one hotel room, and because it was pretty expensive back then, it was much harder. All these internet video conferencing apps, those sorts of things weren't around. So yeah, it was much more challenging. And when we really started off, there wasn't really a very big IT industry at all out of this country. Probably the biggest company would have been Jade, which was they were by far the biggest.
Yep.
Gil Simpson
Yep.
had a good business running out of Christchurch. But after that, it really tapered away quite dramatically. So there wasn't the thriving technology sector that you have in New Zealand today. That did not exist. There wasn't the experience base in New Zealand that you could go to get advice from.
Probably not a lot of podcasts to listen to at that stage because they didn't exist yet.
Podcasts are something like you get in the vegetable garden or something like that, that sort of stuff just didn't exist. Yeah. In fact, we were the first company to get an internet link, certainly in Auckland, I think probably New Zealand, the first business, and we had to write a letter to Europe, and it came back like 2 or 3 months later saying, yes, Orion, you could join internet. So we joined up a 9 kilobit per second analog link to Auckland University, really slow, and we started sending emails and joining chat groups. Wow. And at the time, you couldn't use email for marketing, but we would send out emails to the some of the news groups saying there's a new version of, we had a product called MedLink HL7++. And one of our emails, we said we supported the new version 3. The guy who ran HL7 sent me Wes Rochelle sent me an email. So that's rather interesting. Maybe you could provide us the spec because it hasn't been written yet. So today, internet is full noise, marketing, selling stuff. 30 years or so ago, you weren't allowed to sell things over internet. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, hard to imagine, really, with how much we rely on the internet today, that's for sure.
That's right. And you know, a lot of people are hugely suspicious about internet, whether Wikipedia was better than the Encyclopedia Britannica, whether it was just a place where people could go and get, bad material, bomb recipes and stuff like that. That was the view of internet 30 years ago. And now it's just become indispensable.
Although some of those sort of views still exist in their own. I
think you're right, actually. But the good thing for New Zealand, for our tech sector, it has levelled the playing field hugely from a technology point of view. And so while it was much harder 30 years ago to sell into North America, US, Europe, internet, it's still not easy. But the internet has made it lowered the barrier.
So what were some of the really hard challenges that you had to get through to be able to grow the business in those early days?
The first big challenge, we did quite well out of New Zealand. Counties Manukau was a great customer. Then various other hospitals, Ministry of Health, we used to do a lot of work for them. But the big challenge for us was to get established in North America. Where do you set yourself up? Getting established in the UK, Australia, it was quite hard to do. We had a few slip-ups, but we eventually got up and going in the US. And it was quite challenging to get established in those remote markets.
Slip-ups. Tell me about slip-ups. What did you have to go through there?
Oh, we hired an American sales force. We've got somebody in Florida, somebody in Texas, and a few other locations. Actually, Chicago was pretty good, and it was very hard to control a distributed sales force. And we found that as we were a relatively small New Zealand company coming into a big market like America, you weren't going to get the very best salespeople. Right. Why would they work for you when they could be working for somebody like Hewlett-Packard or Dell, maybe even Apple? And then you have Orion Health, this little wee, not quite a startup, but a pretty small company out of New Zealand. Why would you work for them? And so, often you weren't getting it was a challenge to get the very, very best talent out there. We had a lot of success shipping New Zealanders up there. They had spent a few years working here or out of university, and next thing, they'd be on a big plane, flying to North America. Yeah.
And so you staffed your your international operations very heavily
With Kiwis.
stacked with Kiwis.
Yeah.
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 And it worked out quite well.
When you were still trying to sell, you still had those challenges of being this small New Zealand company, even with Kiwis going to front it. What was that challenge like to be able to get in the door and to close a sale? Was the market sort of such that once they saw what you had to offer, that you were
We got a foothold in America because we visited customers that none of the big North American vendors would visit, because they're so small, rural, out of the way facilities, and so we got going visiting them, and then eventually the projects got bigger and bigger and bigger, and now today we're winning projects into the hundreds of millions, and we're the lead in the project.
Fantastic.
It's these projects are huge. So not too bad for 3 or 4 people who used to do odd jobs all over the show. Not a bad result.
Yeah. And so what did you have to work through in terms of product? Because you've got that health focus, but did you end up with a whole lot of different bits of software that did a million different things, and how has that evolved?
We were pretty lucky earlier on. We got some really, really good developers, and we had a big focus on engineering. In the early days, we had some of the very, very best developers around, and during our midlife, we did move our focus away from pure engineering, and I think it really hurt our products. So we've gone back to being very engineering focused, very focused on producing products for customers. We moved ourselves into a line of business structure, which are like a whole lot of little startups under the umbrella of a bigger organisation. That has worked out really well for us.
And so getting through these various stages of growth, how did you fund that?
We funded it using customer sales. We're bootstrapped.
Yeah.
And it did mean that you're always focused on delivering something which some customer really, really wanted. And if that customer wanted, there'd probably be a half other customers who wanted the same thing. So being customer-led on product development mostly is a good idea. Occasionally you have to sort of jump ahead of what the customer's thinking. But in terms of smaller features, changing the products, improving them incrementally, the customers are great. They are your best product managers. Particularly for in our industry, the doctors and nurses are great. We had a very strong focus on engineering. We could develop things that nobody else could develop. So it was very good.
Why do you think that was, that you were able to develop those things that maybe others weren't developing or weren't able to develop?
We do recruited out of the universities. We got the very, very best developers. We teamed them up with more experienced developers. Yeah, so we just had very, very good engineering.
And what did the feedback loop look like in terms of the getting feedback on what you were developing, but also hearing what potential clients were looking for? I guess part of that would come through the sales cycle.
Well, I think the best example was we did an ED system for South Auckland Health. And we used to go out there. I went up there occasionally. Developers used to go out there a lot. And people in ED, they were just totally blunt. No sugarcoating. They just tell us why our product was rubbish, how it was terrible, and then we fixed here and here. And after 6 months of getting periodically told what was wrong with the product, it actually became quite a good product. In fact, it actually became award-winning. In fact, it became a great product. But it was just the interaction with the specialists, the nurses in particular. That's how we got our very, very best products. And the problem, I think, with these big corporates, and I know Orion suffered from this, is that the developers come detached, isolated from real nurses and doctors. And so at one point, I think we had 3, 4, 5 steps for a requirement to pass through before it got to a developer. So a lot of context, a lot of information is lost. So these days we're getting developers getting right back at it to the customers, doing the installation, installing their pieces of brilliance themselves, and so on and so forth. So that's how we do it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's relevant in any business, isn't it? You know, it can be very easy to get detached. Think what you've got is amazing, and actually, if you go to the coalface and get the word and it's not, you need to be really listening.
Absolutely. As I said before, some of the best product managers are your customers, and they're always very generous with their help and advice. And this is what there was a startup today. That's exactly what I'd be doing. I'd be tapping into that much larger group of people these days who have built businesses globally. New Zealanders are generally very generous with their help.
Yeah, it's true. Well, thank you for your generosity with your time today. So,
haven't you heard? I lost my job, haven't you? I missed the odd job now. Hadn't you heard? Okay.
How you were coping with the change? What you're doing 2 days a week around the office?
I think half time.
I hear. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got to go and ask Brad for a job to do or two. Have to ask him whether I've done a good job or not. Yeah, I have to negotiate my salary with him. It's a bit awkward, It's a little bit awkward. So yeah, it's all good fun. There's a really good younger next generation group of people coming through here. But Orion is truly a really interesting business at the moment. It's just fascinating. What we're trying to do with Orion is that just like your relationship with your bank, you probably don't go to a high street bank anymore. I mean, how often do you go to a real branch? Hardly ever. And
probably not at all, maybe now.
Yeah, I think it's years since. Maybe I went once last year. But health has never ever managed to crack the same sort of relationship with consumers, with patients, because it's probably an order of magnitude more difficult, more complicated. In fact, it's very complicated. But COVID, this pandemic, has caused health economies around the world to have a new look at where to put their investments. And it's not to put it into bigger and better hospitals. The investment has to go into keeping people out of hospitals. Yep. It has to go into treating people, instead of having the obligatory 15-minute appointment made in 5 days' time, you want to treat people straight away in their homes, and if necessary, get them to come in. So health is going to go through a fairly significant transformation over the next couple of years. Health economies around the world are going to be pouring more and more money into exactly the space that Orion Health is a world leader in, probably certainly in the vanguard, if not the leader, in tying medical records together, making them available to physicians and nurses, and making them available to patients as well. Because even today, after years of integration, tying data together, you can go to a specialist and he will not know what drugs you're on. He will not know what problems you've had, what visits to facilities you've had. Now, it has improved. A lot of that is available. But in my situation, I get the odd drug or two from my GP, a few more from my specialist, but I get over-the-counter stuff. So nobody in my circle of care has a full picture of my drugs.
Yes.
And so the reason for that being is the patient themselves aren't involved in their own healthcare. They're just the subject, the object of healthcare, but they're not actually managing it, in control of it, so on and so forth. So I think the big shift in healthcare is to get the patient logging on each morning to the device, because it provides some really useful functionality. The useful things would be, may I suggest? A useful thing would be up-and-coming events. The useful thing would be the medications you're on. And another useful thing is any symptoms or other things going on. This is the stuff that patients would find useful and ultimately could be fed back to specialists and their GPs. So anyhow, it's a hot sector. It's rapidly changing. And nobody has the complete answer today. But Orion's at the forefront, in the vanguard. So interesting times, eh?
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm quite the expert in these matters now, having had a little wee minor brain tumour a year ago. Well, it was actually quite a significant one, actually. And anyhow, it got removed, and treatment, and so I'm very very au
fantastic.
fait with what a chronic patient and what information they would want, what application they would want.
Yeah. Well, and that's always I mean, not you wish that scenario on anybody, but the more that you can sort of sit in the shoes of your customers and their customers and so on.
Yeah, would have
the
preferred
better
it not
you
to
can
have done it
see
this way,
things
but you
through.
know. Yeah, but it does give you a new perspective for sure. But a digital front door in healthcare is pretty much like you would have with a bank. You can log on and you can see all your accounts. You can do all your stuff via one front end. It might be your phone. It could be a web browser.
Now, getting on to the funding side and listing on the NZX.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through that journey? You joked at the beginning around the roller coaster ride of business. I'm picking that maybe that was part of that.
We found the listing period for this company was very challenging. We raised some money for sure. We spent it on R&D, but our R&D wasn't very effective because our developers were isolated from real users, and a lot of the R&D we produced wasn't very good. And I do believe this is a common malay of large software companies. It could be IBM and a few others I think have fallen into this trap. And we certainly did. Then at the same time, the Obamacare sites, we were the dominant vendor in Obamacare, and a lot of the HIE sites, they started running out of money. So first time ever in the company's existence, we started going back in revenue. We went back like 7.5% one year and 7% the next year, I think, something like that. And it had never happened to us before.
So you wouldn't have been well prepared for that then?
No, normally we could grow our way out of any sort of hiccup. But this time we couldn't grow our way out of it. In fact, the hole got deeper because our revenues went backwards. And because we got larger, we'd lost the startup agility we'd had for the first decade or so. And so we didn't respond quickly enough. And another real problem was a lot of our projects are big projects, into the tens of millions of dollars or more. They were material contracts. So we had a lot of difficulty, like when can we announce this project? The customer won't let us announce it. We have to announce it because it's a material contract. And it was just, we spent so much time in our disclosure committee discussing what we could or couldn't disclose. So, it was bad timing, and Orion wasn't the greatest of fit in terms of being a listed company. So it was very tough. So we had to do some pretty significant cost cutting, savings. We took one part of our business, Rhapsody, which was a very mature product, very profitable, probably getting close to its zenith. We sold that off, and that provided us the resources to delist. And then we took a lot of cost out of the business and got back to profitability. But yes, roller coaster journey. Yep, absolutely.
Well, you made it through. That's
only just.
When you look back, what have been the other sort of challenging times which have ended up with some good lessons?
One challenging time was going from 15 to 25 people. Because up until 15 people, one person, you knew what was going on, you knew all the sales, you knew all the projects, you knew everything. Past 20 people, there was just too much going on, and it got too complicated. And then, unless you delegated and had a team working for you, of managers or people responsible for various areas, you couldn't grow. So as a business, we sort of stalled for a couple of years around about the 20-person mark, as we started getting some more leaders in place and so on and so forth. That was one tricky thing. Another thing was when you're very small, just being credible. What do you mean you're going for a $25 million project? Your revenues are only $2 million. How can you do a $25 million project? So that was quite tricky. One challenge meant that we had to always bid through other people.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, when you're small, you have to bid through a systems integrator.
Right.
But as we've got bigger, and now we don't have to do that anymore, which is so you can control your own projects.
Was that part of how you got those bigger customers when you were going for the $10 or $20 million project and so on, or were there other tricks to building that confidence?
Doing bigger and bigger projects.
Right. So it was a gradual process.
one project recently is in the hundreds of millions. The view was that another vendor had a full Nelson lock on this tender where nobody else had a chance, so we couldn't get a system integrator to bid with us. So we bidded ourselves and happened to win.
Fantastic.
We're an enterprise B2B software and big projects. So it comes with its your own unique set of challenges. If you're selling over internet, a subscription to $1,000 a month kind of product, or a couple of grand a month, it's far easier. So we get exposed to lots of very, very large international tenders, often issued by governments, often very well organised, but very, very competitive. They're playing us against everybody else. So they're fairly challenging projects to go after.
And how do you decide what to go after? Because, each one of those bids must be very expensive in terms of time and resource
they can run to easily run to $500,000 or $1 million to respond. Yeah, easily. Well, you got to look at, first of all, how good is your product fit? Secondly, how well do you know the customer? Do they have a budget set aside? All these gates you want to get through. Yeah. And then once you're committed, you're committed. And once you got like a couple $100 grand into the bid, it's very hard to pull out. It's very hard.
And you talked about going in for bids where it seemed like that there was somebody else that was going to win it, or it seemed pretty challenging. How do you get that confidence? Because it may feel a bit like gambling going into some of these sorts of opportunities.
Sometimes you don't even know right at the last moment. I remember we won a big deal in Australia, and I found it out in some supermarket. I can't remember which supermarket it was. And I was certain we'd lost, and you just don't know. And that's a sign of a really good, well-run bid process. They've kept it totally, and there should be a review process at the end of it. The countries that do a good job, that's what they do. Tenders can be challenged. Yeah. So yeah.
And in terms of people, you've talked about having some really incredible people. You can't build a business like this without amazing people.
Absolutely.
How have you done that? How have you found those people? How have you developed your people?
We had a lot of success with graduates. In fact, some of them have stayed with us 10, 20 years. And we had some great people out of Auckland University, actually all the New Zealand universities. And you just try and get the very, very best talent you can get. But I guess the other lesson is you have the best talent, but if you don't organise them correctly, they will be inefficient. Mm-hmm. And if you don't organise them correctly, there'll be lots of meetings and politics and other bits and pieces. I knew we had a little bit of a problem during a listing when I asked one of my developers who'd been with me for actually 20 years, actually more. So what did you do this week, Paul? And he says to me, I've been in meetings all week. And I said, you're a very good developer. You shouldn't be in meetings. You should be developing. So these days, as we've gone back to a startup line of business model, you don't have to book meeting rooms. The meeting rooms are all free. You just bolt into one. And when you're in a small startup kind of operation, you don't have to have a meeting because everybody's discussing stuff all the time. In fact, when Orion got going, we didn't have a company meeting for the first 2 or 3 years. And I was a bit embarrassed. I thought real companies had meetings, so we better had one. So we sat down on the boardroom and said, okay, what are we going to talk about? Well, we don't really know. What's the action items from the last meeting? Well, we didn't really take them. We had some action items, but they're well out of date now. Turned out we didn't need to have a meeting because we had a continuous meeting. Mm-hmm. As a startup, in one room, it was one big ongoing meeting, and you'd ask a quick question, get answered. Some people who were interested would make a contribution. Everybody else would carry on. One big meeting. Everybody knew what was going on.
How do you find that translates today with remote nature of things? You've got offices in 15 odd countries, a workforce that's really spread out. Obviously, different layers of management.
It is really tricky, and the line of business model is okay to some extent, but the real problem is when you come to do an installation of products from multiple lines of businesses, which happens to us a lot. So normally you want the developers in the line of business people themselves to do that install. So that's the one area we have we try and have a blended local people and product people doing the install, so the product people can learn how well their product is or isn't performing, how easy is it to install. As these software organisations do get bigger, retaining your startup innovation, agility isn't easy, which is why you see a lot of big software companies really slow up in innovation.
Yeah, that's actually quite fascinating. I think we've probably all seen it with software that was very innovative at one point in time,
Yeah.
but you sort of look back and think, hasn't really changed much for quite a few years. Whereas often in the early days, these things are really improving at quite a clip.
I think the model that we look on as being one of the best for large scale software development operations would be Amazon. They've done a fantastic job, remain very, very innovative. Google has their moments, and I think Microsoft have reinvented themselves in recent times, so there's innovation coming out of them as well. But the Amazon AWS do have some very, very good processes.
And because you've been around for a while, that means you've got code that was written a long time ago.
Yeah, don't tell me about it. No. That code you want to delete. Yeah, we got a lot of that. Yeah.
How do you deal with that stuff?
It's code that was very, very good 10 years ago, leading edge. Now it's been replaced by React or something else that's come along. You have to keep your software current. No software developer wants to work on technology that's a decade old. They all want to do the new shiny, Scala, or we're doing a bit of that these days, or whatever. So it is the biggest problem, the biggest challenge, your legacy software, keeping it current.
Yeah, so you do have to put some effort into that to keep it moving forward, and that's also sort of part of probably cybersecurity and privacy type things. As time goes on, we deal with new challenges. So that
the biggest thing that's making a difference here is the move to the cloud. Because for free out of the box, you immediately get some protection from the cloud vendors such as Amazon. When you're in the cloud, the software vendor is suddenly responsible for doing upgrades. And that was a bit of a rude awakening for us, because software used to go on to hospital sites, and it was up to them to do the upgrades.
Yeah.
And that was okay, we got paid for it. The problem was, though, a lot of our sites got on older and older and older software because they didn't bother doing the upgrades. And then what would happen is they say, well, the software is very, very old. We need to spend $20 million on buying this new shiny thing, or $39 million to buy this new shiny thing over here. But if you just spent a little bit of money upgrading this guy over here, you wouldn't have had the big capital outlay. But I think the cloud is making a massive difference. The upgrade problem for customers mainly goes away. You get a lot of extra cybersecurity protection. So, yep.
Yeah. Now, sort of stepping back and looking at New Zealand's sort of broader technology sector and use of technology, what are your thoughts on our opportunity as a country going forward to really take advantage of innovation that often comes out of New Zealand?
The tech sector is going to become our biggest sector, bigger than dairy, bigger than everything else. And, it's going to happen over the next 10 years or maybe sooner. And selling software, selling technology, from an environmental point of view, apart from the old plane trip, is generally very good for the environment. It doesn't use up a lot of land. Basically you're putting your ideas into software and then selling it.
The weightless export, as they call it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Helen Clark with her knowledge wave thing, I think was the pivotal point. Prior to that, software was just something, kooky thing off to one side. After that conference, the tech sector got far more prominence, far more focus, and look at where we are today, a burgeoning sector which is going to become our biggest exporter.
And it's interesting to mark that point in time from a very talented political leader. Where do you see government and politics, sort of what their role should look like going forward?
I see some nice things about the Labour Party, okay. But the current Labour Party has done a very poor job of engaging with the business sector. It's hard to find a business organisation who's had a good experience there. And I think it's a totally missed opportunity. These people who run big companies, thousands, tens of thousands of employees, they get those jobs because they're really good at running big things. And the Helen Clark government tapped into that. This government hasn't, which I think is a bit disappointing. I think they missed an opportunity. A lot of businesses wanted to help out during the COVID period. That didn't work out very well. It's a missed opportunity.
So some lessons for whoever's next.
Who is next? Let's put it that way. And find that a lot of business leaders are very generous with their time, with their resources, prepared to help the country. A lot of them do philanthropic things. So they can be very helpful.
And look, I think in technology, all sorts of areas of business, sport, we have so many Kiwis that punch above their weight on that global stage, and it makes sense to tap in and take advantage of that, doesn't it?
Yeah, not even just New Zealanders living here, but all over the world, prepared to help.
That's great. It's been fascinating to chat. Anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up, Ian?
No, just that when I started off in technology to where we are today, it's just worlds apart. It's just people don't understand how things have changed, and for the better. This country has just such wonderful prospects and technology, and you find a lot of really clever people around the world want to move here. We should encourage that.
I agree wholeheartedly on that one.
Thanks everybody for listening in, and thank you of course to our show partners, Vodafone, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, and Gorilla Technology for their support, keeping us going.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. Thank you, Ian McCrae.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.